still haunt me. The cries of these women whose husbands and children were taken from them pierce my soul like 1,000 knives. Visa's eyes seemed to bore into Yudhishthira's very being as he listened to his words. After a moment of contemplative silence, the sage spoke in a voice that was both gentle and profound. No man can acquire anything through his own efforts or sacrifices. Visa said, wealth, power, knowledge, all these are gifts of time itself. Time is the great wardener weaving the tapestry of our lives with its threads of fate. Sometimes an ignorant fool may stumble upon success, but it is only because the currents of time have favored him. Visa's words painted the picture in Yudhishthira's mind, a vast expanse of time stretching out like an endless scene, carrying all beings on its waves of destiny. The king listened with rapt attention as Visa continued. Time brings prosperity and adversity, joy and sorrow to all creatures alike. It is the great equalizer, reducing the mighty to dust and elevating the lowly to heights unimaginable. We are but mere pawns in its grand game, subject to its whims and fancies. As Vasa spoke, his words seemed to conjure up visions of a world where time was the only constant. Yudhishthira saw the cycles of nature, the ebb and flow of rivers, the blooming and withering of flowers, the birth and death of all living things, all governed by time's imperatives. Visa paused, his eyes sparkling with wisdom as he gazed at Yudhishthira. The wise man knows that true happiness lies not in attachment to worldly possessions or fleeting pleasures, but in detachment from them. He sees the world for what it is, a vast, ever-changing tapestry of sorrow and joy woven by time itself. As the sage finished speaking, the assembly fell silent, lost in contemplation of Vasa's words. Yudhishthira's face seemed to reflect the depth of his understanding, a mix of sadness, acceptance, and newfound wisdom. He knew that he had been given a rare gift, a glimpse into the mysteries of time itself. Visa's final words hung in the air like the great sage Vaisampayana stood before Arjuna, his eyes shining with wisdom as he began to speak. Your Majesty, he said, addressing Yudhishthira, has often spoken of the importance of wealth and its role in achieving success, but is it truly superior to all else? Yudhishthira's words echoed in Vaisampayana's mind as he continued his tale. Many have achieved greatness through their devotion to study and penance. He said, the sages who walk the path of Brahmacharya, dedicating themselves to the pursuit of knowledge, are revered by the gods themselves. Vaisampayana paused, collecting his thoughts before continuing. And what of those who dedicate themselves to the study of the Vedas? Are they not true virtuous men? The Vaikhanasas, the Yajas, the Prishnas, and many others have achieved heaven through their devotion to Vedic knowledge. As he spoke, a hint of reverence crept into Vaisampayana's voice. The path of Dakshinayana, he said, leads to those regions reserved for those who follow the teachings of the Vedas, but the northern path, that of Uttarayana, is traveled by those who have mastered the art of yoga. Yudhishthira's words had sparked a chain of thoughts within Vaisampayana, and he pressed on, his voice gaining momentum. Contentment, he said, is the key to true happiness. When one has transcended desire and attachment, when one is free from fear and hatred, then they have attained to the state of Brahma. Vaisampayana's eyes seemed to gaze into a distant realm as he spoke of the various paths that lead to salvation. Some seek virtue, some good conduct, while others pursue wealth. But true wisdom lies in understanding that wealth is a means to an end, not an end itself. His words were laced with a sense of warning. Wealth can be a curse, bringing troubles and hardships in its wake. The pursuit of riches often leads men to commit acts of aggression, forgetting the fear of repentance. And when they do acquire wealth, they are beset by grief at having to part with it, or else suffer the slings of obloquy. Vaisampayana's voice took on a note of sadness as he spoke of those who accumulate wealth but fail to use it for its true purpose. Wealth was created for sacrifices, he said, and man was created to protect that wealth and perform those very same sacrifices. It is not meant for the gratification of our desires. As he finished speaking, Vaisampayana's eyes seemed to hold a deep wisdom, as if he had gazed into the very heart of existence. The wise know that true wealth lies.
The sun had set over the desolate landscape, casting a golden glow over the assembly gathered before Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandava brothers. His eyes, red-rimmed from tears and grief, gaze out at the sea of faces. As he began to speak, "Alas, my friends," he said, his voice cracking with emotion, "I am consumed by sorrow. The weight of my actions bears down upon me like a mountain range. I am a slayer of kinsmen, a covetous king, and an exterminator of my own race. How can I bear the shame of having caused the death of Abhimanyu, that brave young warrior who was like a lion born in the hills? His tender years were cut short by my hand, and now he lies still on the battlefield as Yudhishthira spoke. His words seemed to hang in the air like a challenge. He recalled the day when their grandsire, Bhishma, had fallen to Partha's shafts like a thunderbolt, striking down an aged lion. The memory of that moment still pained him deeply, and one of my preceptor Drona. He continued, his voice growing more agitated. I falsely told him that Aswathaman was dead, when in truth it was only an elephant by that name that had been slain. My heart burns with shame at the thought of having deceived him, a man who had taught me the ways of the warrior. The assembly listened in rapt attention as Yudhishthira recounted his crimes, the death of Karna, the slaying of Abhimanyu, and the destruction of their own kin. His words were like a litany of sorrow, each one piercing his heart with renewed anguish. I am a great offender, he declared, his voice shaking with emotion. I have brought shame upon myself and my family. I can no longer bear to live in this world stained by the blood of my own kin. I shall take the prey, vow and dray up my life breaths here on this very spot. As Yudhishthira spoke these words, a sudden silence fell over the assembly. The air seemed to vibrate with the weight of his sorrow, and the assembled sages and kings looked on in stunned amazement. But Vesa, the great sage, stepped forward to intervene. Nay, O monarch, he said, his voice like a gentle breeze on a summer day, it is not for you to indulge in such poignant grief. This too is destiny, O puissant one. All creatures are born and die, their union with this world ending in dissolution. Vesa's words were like a balm to Yudhishthira's soul. He listened intently as the sage explained that all things rise and fall like bubbles on the surface of the In a poignant scene, Vesampeda recounted an ancient tale to Yudhishthira, the eldest son of Pandu, who was consumed by grief over the slaughter of his kinsman. Vesa the sage had sensed Yudhishthira's anguish and decided to share with him a profound discourse known as Isma's teachings. The story began in the kingdom of Vidya, where King Janak sought the counsel of the wise Brahmana. Asma, overwhelmed by sorrow and loss, Janak asked for guidance on how to navigate life's challenges. Asma's words were like a balm to Janak's troubled heart, offering wisdom that would resonate with Yudhishthira. As well, Asma began by explaining the fleeting nature of human existence. Immediately after the formation of a man's body, joys and griefs attach themselves to it. He said, life is a delicate balance between happiness and sorrow, and whichever overtakes us quickly robs us of our reason. Asma cautioned that even in times of prosperity one's mind becomes clouded with vanity, leading to reckless behavior and eventual downfall. As the conversation unfolded, Asma revealed that all human experiences, be it joy or suffering, wealth or poverty, health or illness, are predetermined by destiny. The course of time is very wonderful, he said. High birth, health, beauty, prosperity, and objects of enjoyment are all won through destiny. Asma's teachings painted a vivid picture of the transience of life, where even the strongest and most prosperous can fall victim to decrepitude and death. Janak listened intently as Asma continued to explain that no one can escape their fate, even physicians. Get ill, he said, the strong become weak. They that are in the enjoyment of prosperity lose all and become indigent. The wise Brahmana's words were a stark reminder of the inevitability of life's journey, where every individual is subject to the whims of Timmy's. Yudhishthira listened to Asma's discourse. He began to grasp the profound implications, reflecting on these questions. Where am I? Where shall go? Who am I? How come I here? What for? And whom I grieve? One obtains tranquility, Asma said. The union with loved ones is like that of travelers at a roadside in its transitory, and our true nature remains elusive. As the tale came to an end, Vesampeda turned to Yudhishthira and asked him to reflect on the wisdom shared by Asma. Men of knowledge behold as if with corporeal eyes the next world that is unseen, he said, without disregarding the scriptures. One desirous of knowledge should have faith. The story served as a poignant reminder that life's journey is but a brief moment in the midst of a devastating war. Yudhishthira, the son of Dharma, stood silent, his heart heavy with grief. His cousin Arjuna, the mighty warrior, approached Krishna,
seeking guidance on how to comfort their fallen. King Prisha Arjuna said, Dharma's son is consumed by sorrow for our slain kin. Please, O Madhava, offer him solace. We have all been brought into great peril once more. It behooves you to dispel his grief. Vasavana continued the tale, describing how Krishna, the lotus-eyed Govinda, turned towards Yudhishthira. For years Krishna had been dearer to Yudhishthira than even Arjuna himself. With a gentle touch, Krishna took hold of Yudhishthira's hand adorned with sandal, passed and began to speak of Tejra among men. Krishna said, Do not indulge in such grief that emaciates your body. Those who have fallen will never be regained. Our slain Kshatriyas were Hera's ornaments of battle, vanquished while rushing towards their foes. They did not fall with wounds on the back or while fleeing, having contended with Heras and cast off their life breaths. They have sanctified by weapons proceeded to heaven. Krishna then shared an ancient discourse of Narada, spoken before a king named Srinjaya, who was afflicted with grief over his son's death, subject to happiness and misery. Myself, yourself, and all creatures will have to die. Narada said, What cause is there for sorrow? Listen to me as I recite the great blessedness of ancient King Krishna. Told the story of Maruta, a king who was the son of a Vaishya. Despite his own death, Maruta had performed a grand sacrifice called Viswasrij, where he even vanquished Sakra. The chief of the gods, Krishna, spoke of Sautra, another king who showered gold upon his kingdom for 1 whole year, and had the rivers bear golden tortoises, crabs, alligators, sharks, and porpoises. Krishna recounted the tales of Vrihadratha, the king of the Indus, who gave away 100,000 steeds, maidens adorned with golden ornaments, and elephants. He told of Sevai, the son of Usanara, who rode on a single victorious car and subjugated all monarchs. And finally Krishna spoke of Bharata, the son of Dashmata, and Sikantala, who had a vast treasury and devoted horses to the gods. As Krishna's words washed over Yudhishthira like a soothing balm, he began to understand that even the greatest kings would fall prey to death. Their sacrifices and gifts were but fleeting moments in time. In the realm of ancient wisdom, a tale unfolds of love, betrayal, and redemption. It begins with Yudhishthira's inquiry to Krishna about the enigmatic Suvarnashdevan, the son of Srinjaya. Krishna agrees to recount the story as it transpired. It is said that Narada, a revered rishi, and his nephew Parvata, a wise and powerful ascetic, had once left heaven for a leisurely stroll on earth. Their intention was to savor the simple pleasures of clarified butter and rice which they obtained from human beings. As they wandered, they made a pact that any thought or desire that harbored would be revealed to each other. Their agreement was tested when Narada's eyes fell upon Sukumari, the beautiful daughter of King Srinjaya. Enchanted by her charms, he failed to disclose his feelings to Parvata, who sensed his nephew's attachment through signs and ascetic power. Filled with rage, Parvata resolved to curse Narada for breaking their compact. You have violated our agreement, Parvata declared. You are a Brahmachar and my preceptor and an ascetic. Yet you have broken the bond we shared. I shall curse you. Sukumari will become your wife. But from that day on, both she and all men will behold you as an Narada, consumed by wrath, cursed Parvata in return, saying, Though you possess great ascetic merit and virtue, you shall not succeed in proceeding to heaven. The two rishis flamed against each other like infuriated elephants. As fate would have it, Narada obtained Sukumari's hand in marriage. However, the curse took hold, and she beheld him with an imp-like face after their wedding. Yet her devotion remained unwavering. She dedicated herself entirely to her Lord. Disregarding his physical form, one day as Parvata wandered through a solitary forest, he encountered Narada. The latter, still affected by the curse, was overjoyed to see his nephew and asked for forgiveness. Parvata too sought redemption, acknowledging that he had acted impulsively. The two rishis freed each other from their mutual curses. Upon beholding her husband's true form, Sukumari fled in confusion. Mistaking him for someone else, Parvata assured her, This is indeed your lord Narada. He is the illustrious and puissant rishi, a virtuous person of one soul with you. Convinced by Parvata's words and freed from the curse, Sukumari regained her equanimity. With their bond restored, Parvata proceeded to heaven, while Narada returned home accompanied by his devoted wife. This poignant tale serves as a testament to the complexities of human relationships and the transformative power of forgiveness. And in the midst of a conversation with Narada, King Yudhishthira asked to hear about the birth of a child whose excreta were gold. Narada began to recount the tale, which began when he and his nephew, the great ascetic Parvata, visited Srinjaya. The foremost of all victorious King Srinjaya, honored by their presence, asked for their guidance in seeking a boon. Parvata suggested that he think of what would bring him happiness, but also warned him to consider the potential consequences of his desire. Srinjaya thought deeply and ultimately requested a son who was heroic, energetic, firm in his vows, long-lived, highly blessed, and possessed of splendor equal to that of Indra himself. Parvata granted the boon, but with a caveat: the child would not be long-lived, as Srinjaya's wish for such a son was seen as a challenge to Indra's authority. However, Parvata also warned Srinjaya to protect his son from Indra's wrath. Despite this warning, Srinjaya requested that his son be long-lived through the ascetic merit of Parvata's. Narada continued his story. He revealed that after some time had passed, Srinjaya had indeed been blessed with a son named Suvarnashivan, who grew up to be powerful and energetic. However, Indra, fearing humiliation at the hands of the child, when he grew up, sent his celestial whip on thunder to slay it. The prince Teja, assuming the form of thunder, came upon the boy while he was playing by the Bhagirathi river with his nurse. The infant prince trembled violently as he was crushed by the Teja and soon fell down lifeless on the earth. His nurse cried out in grief, and Srinjaya, hearing her cries, rushed to the spot and found his son lying lifeless. Stricken with grief, Srinjaya thought of Narada, who appeared before him and recited stories that would bring the king solace with Indra's permission. Narada brought Srinjaya's child back to life. The prince Suvarnashivan went on to delight his parents and eventually ascended the throne after his father's passing, ruling for years. Performed many great sacrifices, gratifying the gods and the Pitras with his splendor. He procreated many sons who multiplied the royal family. Eventually, Suvarnashivan passed away, but not before Narada counseled King Yudhishthira to dispel his grief and continue performing high and great sacrifices to ensure a prosperous future for his kingdom. As Narada concluded his tale, he urged King Yudhishthira to rise up and bear the burden of his ancestral kingdom, just as Suvarnashivan had. The island-born sage Vesa stood before King Yudhishthira, his eyes filled with compassion and wisdom. The king's grief still lingered, a palpable weight that seemed to suffocate him. Vesa's words were like a gentle breeze on a summer day, soothing the king's troubled heart. Though of eyes like Clovis petals, Vesa began: the protection of subjects is the duty of kings. Those men who are always observant of duty regard duty as all-powerful. The sage's voice was like music, echoing the eternal truths of the Vedas penances. Therefore, O bold Bharata's race constitute the eternal duty of Brahmanas. The Kshatriya is the protector of all persons in respect of their duties. Yudhishthira listened intently, his eyes fixed on the sage, as if seeking solace from the weight of his own conscience. He knew that Vesa spoke the truth, but the memories of the war still haunted him. The faces of those he had slain lingered in his mind like specters, their cries echoing through the chambers of his heart. Vesa sensed the king's distress and pressed on his words, a gentle prodding to stir Yudhishthira from his grief. That man who, addicted to earthly possessions, transgresses wholesome restraints that often are against social harmony should be chastised with a strong hand. The sage's voice was firm but kind, guiding the king towards the path of righteousness. Yudhishthira's response was like a sigh, a deep breath that seemed to release some of the tension from his chest. I do not doubt the words that fall from the lips of thou of great ascetic merit. Everything appertaining to morality and duty is well known to thee. The king's voice trembled, revealing the depth of his sorrow. Vesa nodded sympathetically, his eyes filled with understanding. If man, O Bharata, does all acts good or bad, being urged thereto by the Supreme Being, then the fruits of those acts should take to the Supreme Being himself. The sage's words were like a puzzle piece falling into place, illuminating the mystery of karma and destiny. As Vesa spoke, the king's grief began to lift, replaced by a sense of clarity. He saw that he was not responsible for the actions of others, but rather for his own choices. If again man be himself the agent of all his acts, virtuous and sinful, then Supreme Director there is none. Vesa continued, and therefore whatever thou hast done cannot bring evil consequences on thee. A king's face was like a mask hiding the turmoil that still raged within him. But as he listened to Vesa's words, he began to see a glimmer of hope. He realized that his actions had consequences. The sun had set over the vast expanse of the battlefield, casting a golden glow over the desolate landscape. Yudhishthira The eldest of the Pandava brothers stood before his wise and venerable grandfather Vesa. His eyes were filled with grief and remorse as he spoke of the countless lives lost in the great warsons and grandsons, brothers and fathers, fathers-in-law and preceptors, maternal uncles and grandsires, so many high-souled Kshatriyas, relatives by marriage, friends, companions, sisters, sons, and kinsmen. Yudhishthira listed them all, his voice trembling with emotion. I have caused the slaughter of these great men, driven by my desire for the kingdom. Vesa listened attentively to Yudhishthira's words, his eyes filled with compassion and understanding. He knew that the young king was consumed by guilt and sorrow, haunted by the memories of the fallen warriors, remembering the duties of a Kshatriya. O King Vesa began, do not give way to grief. These brave men fell in the observance of their proper duties, pursuing great prosperity and fame on earth. Time was the cause of their demise, not you or your brother. Yudhishthira's eyes widened as he listened to Vesa's words. He had never considered that his actions were not the sole cause of the deaths. The wise old sage continued to speak, explaining that time is the ultimate destroyer, taking away life breaths without favor or prejudice. The gods and Nezuras fought against each other in a great battle, Vesa said, lasting for 1,000 years. The gods slew the deities, gaining possession of heaven. Many Brahmanas were killed by the gods, but they were wicked-souled individuals who desired the extinction of virtue. Vesa's words painted a vivid picture in Yudhishthira's mind. He saw the great battle between the gods and Nezuras, the slaughter of the deities, and the subsequent rise of the Brahmanas. The wise old sage explained that sin sometimes assumes the form of virtue and vice versa. Amen. Like yourselves, never go to hell, Vesa assured Yudhishthira. You have followed the path trodden by the gods themselves. Console yourself, O son of Pandu, for you are well versed in the scriptures. Yudhishthira's face lit up with a glimmer of hope as he listened to Vesa's words. He felt the weight lift off his shoulders, and his heart began to heal. The wise old sage recommended that Yudhishthira perform a grand horse sacrifice, a rite indicated by the scriptures as an expiation for his sins. Made preparations for this sacrifice, O monarch, Vesa said, and in the midst of a dense forest, Vesa sat in deep contemplation, his eyes gazing into the distance as he pondered the weighty matters of the soul. He turned to Bharata and said, my son, if one has committed the grave sin of slaying a Brahmana, there are various paths to redemption. By performing penances, observing vows, and making amends through gifts, one can wash away their transgressions. Vesa continued, his words flowing like a gentle stream. If one subsists on only one meal a day procured by mendicancy and performs all tasks without the aid of servants, they may be cleansed of their sin in 12 years by becoming a brahmachar and always ready for exertion, casting off malice, sleeping on the bare ground, publishing their offense to the world, and doing so with sincerity one can purify themselves. Bharata listened intently as Vesa revealed more secrets of atonement by perishing upon the weapon of a person, living by arms, or by throwing oneself down into a blazing fire, or by walking 100 yojanas. While reciting the Vedas, one may be cleansed of their sin by giving away one's entire property to a learned Brahmana, or protecting kine and Brahmanas. One can also attain redemption. As Vesa spoke, his words wove together like a tapestry, revealing the complexities of human nature. By living on the scantest meal every day for 6 years, one may be cleansed of their sin. By observing an even harder vow with regard to food, one may be purified in 3 years. And by living on only one meal a month, one may be cleansed within a year. Bharata's eyes widened as he listened to the various methods of atonement. And what of those who have committed adultery or theft? He asked. Vesa replied, one who has been guilty of such transgressions can become cleansed by observing rigid vows for a year. When one steals another's property, they should return it in full value to the rightful owners. The sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow over the forest. Vesa spoke of women and their capacity for redemption. Women, O king, may be cleansed of all their sins by observing a regulated life for 1 year. By living on scanty food, they can purify themselves in 6 months. Bharata's mind was reeling with the numerous paths to atonement revealed by Vesa. He asked, what of those who have fallen from their vows? Can they still be cleansed? Vesa replied, yes, My son, one who has fallen off from the vow of Brahmacharya can become cleansed by wearing the hide of a cow for 6 months and observing the penances laid down in the case of. In the presence of Yudhishthira, his grandfather Vesa began to recount an ancient tale. "Tell me, O grandson." Yudhishthira had asked, "What food is clean and what unclean, what gift is praiseworthy, and who should be considered deserving, and who undeserving?" Vesa's eyes sparkled as he settled into his narrative. In the distant past, a gathering of rishis, men of great spiritual power and austerity, approached man, the Lord of creation. Man revered one. They said, "We seek your wisdom on matters of duty and virtue." Man, pleased by their reverence, began to speak. "Listen well, my dear sages," he said, "in regions where sacred rituals are not forbidden, silent recitation of mantras, fasting, knowledge of the self, and sacred rivers are considered cleansing. Certain mountains to possess purifying properties, eating gold, bathing in waters infused with gems and precious stones. These also bring about spiritual purification." And his words were like a gentle breeze on a summer day, soothing and calming to the rishis' ears. Sojourning to holy places, he continued, and eating sanctified butter. These actions cleanse one swiftly. He paused, his eyes twinkling with wisdom. "But my dear sages," man cautioned, "no man can claim to be wise if he allows pride to consume him. If he wishes to live a long life, he must atone for his pride by drinking hot water on 3 consecutive nights." As the rishis listened intently, Manu outlined the characteristics of virtue: refusal to take what is not given, gift-giving, study of scriptures, penance, abstention from injury, truthfulness, freedom from wrath, and worship of the gods in sacrifices. He explained that these virtues may sometimes be considered sins depending on the circumstances. Vesa's narrative flowed smoothly, like a river meandering through the countryside. Men spoke further about the nature of virtue and sin. He continued, "From a worldly perspective, acts are judged by their consequences, good or evil. But from a Vedic standpoint, all actions can be categorized as either virtuous or sinful." The rishis listened with rapt attention as man elaborated on the concept of inaction, leading to emancipation, and action resulting in repeated death and rebirth. Vesa's voice wove a spell of enchantment around Yudhishthira, drawing him deeper into the tales. The discourse progressed. Man outlined specific rules for brahmanas regarding food. The bull earth, little ants, worms generated in dirt, and poison should not be eaten, he said. Fish without scales, 4-footed aquatic animals, like frogs and others, except the tortoise, are also forbidden. He warned against consuming the milk of certain. The sun was setting over Hastinapura, casting a warm orange glow over the bustling streets. Yudhishthira, the eldest son of Pandu and Kunti, sat in contemplation, his eyes fixed on the ground as he pondered the weight of his actions. He had caused a great slaughter of kinsmen, and the memory of it haunted him. Still the thought of approaching Bhishma, the wise and noble grandsire of the Kurus, to ask about duties and morality was almost too much for him to bear. Just then Vesa, the revered sage, appeared before him. "If you wish to hear about duties and morality in full," he said, "then ask Bhishma, O king, conversant with all duties and possessed of universal knowledge. That son of Bhagirathi will remove all your doubts on this difficult subject." Vesa's words were like a gentle breeze on a summer day, soothing Yudhishthira's troubled mind. But Yudhishthira was torn. He had caused the death of Bhishma himself, that warrior who had always fought fairly, and he felt unworthy to approach him. For guidance, Vesa sensed his hesitation and reassured him, "It behooves you not to show such pertinacity and grief. Do what the holy Vesa has said." Krishna, the divine prince, stepped forward and addressed Yudhishthira with gentle words. "O best of kings, do not let your grief consume you. For the sake of these high-souled Brahmanas, for the command of our revered senior Vesa, and at the request of ourselves, who are the well-wishers, and of Draupadi, O scorcher of foes, do what is agreeable to us, O slayer of foes, and what is beneficial to the world." Yudhishthira's resolve was strengthened. He rose from his seat, surrounded by his brothers and friends who urged him on with words of encouragement. The procession began, a magnificent sight to behold. Yudhishthira ascended a white chariot adorned with blankets and deer skins. Its 16 white bullocks, Yoked to it, their eyes shining like stars in the evening light as they made their way through the city. The streets were filled with the sound of panegyrists and bards chanting Yudhishthira's praises. The citizens of Hastinapura had come out in force to honor their king, adorning the streets with flowers, banners, and garlands. The air was filled with the sweet scent of incense and perfumes, and the sound of music and lyre as they approached Bhishma's dwelling. Yudhishthira felt a sense of trepidation give way to hope. He knew that he would find guidance and wisdom in the words of his. The sun was setting over Hastinapura as Yudhishthira, Emma, Arjuna, and the two sons of Magdri, Nakila, and Sahadeva entered the city. Thousands upon thousands of its citizens poured out to behold the sight. Their faces filled with joy and wonder. The well-adorned squares and streets were a sea of colorful garments and ornaments, shimmering like the Essene Hyttadias. The Pandavas made their way through the crowds. The ladies of Hastinapur showed them with praise and adoration. Worthy of all praise are you, they said to Yudhishthira. You have vanquished your enemies and recovered your kingdom through virtue and prowess. The ladies' soft voices were like a gentle breeze on a summer day, carrying the words of their devotion to the ears of the Pandavas. The city was filled with the sound of joyous shouts and laughter as the people celebrated the return of their beloved king. Yudhishthira, surrounded by his brothers and the ladies of Hastinapur, made his way to the palace of the Kuras. The people of the city and its provinces approached the palace, bearing gifts and offerings for their victorious monarch. As Yudhishthira entered the palace, he was greeted with even more praise and adoration by good luck, O foremost of kings. They said, You have vanquished your enemies and recovered your kingdom through virtue and prowess. Be our monarch for 100 years and protect us virtuously like Indra, protecting the denizens of heaven. A king graced with victory and the blessings of his people accepted their words and entered the palace. He descended from his chariot and made his way to the inner apartments, where he worshipped the householder gods with gums, scents, and floral wreaths. As Yudhishthira emerged from the palace once more, he was surrounded by a group of Brahmanas who had come bearing auspicious articles for pronouncing benedictions upon him. The king looked beautiful like the spotless moon in the midst of the stars as he accepted their offerings and gifts. But amidst the joy and celebration, a dark figure emerged from the shadows. Charvak, a Rakshasa disguised as a Brahmana, stood proudly in the midst of the gathering, his eyes gleaming with malice. All these Brahmanas, he said, are saying that you are a wicked king, a slayer of kinsmen. What shall you gain by having exterminated your race? Of Brahmanas were deeply agitated by Charvaka's words, and they made a loud uproar. Yudhishthira was stung by the Rakshasa's speech, and he fell silent with anxiety and shame. But then one of the Brahmanas, in a somber tone, Vasampana, began his tale, addressing King Yudhishthira, who stood before him with his brothers. Janardana, as Devakai's son was known, spoke to the king, his voice filled with reverence for the Brahmanas in this world. O sire, he said, Brahmanas are revered by me as gods on earth. Their words can be as poisonous as a serpent's fang, yet they are easy to please. As Janardana spoke, his eyes seemed to gaze into the past, recalling an era long forgotten in the Krita age, when time itself was measured in cycles of creation and destruction. A Rakshasa named Charvaka had performed austere penances for many years in the distant land of Vedarai. The Brahmanas, who were revered as gods on earth, repeatedly urged him to ask for boons. But Charvaka's pride and ambition drew him to seek more. Finally, after years of devotion, Charvaka approached the Lord of the universe and requested a boon that would grant him immunity from fear at the hands of all creatures. The Lord, moved by Charvaka's determination, granted his wish, but with one condition: he must be careful not to offend the Brahmanas, unbeknownst to the Lord. This boon would ultimately prove to be Charvaka's downfall. With his newfound invincibility, Charvaka began to wreak havoc on the gods themselves. The gods, persecuted and helpless against the Rakshasas, might assemble together and approach the eternal God for assistance. The God replied that he had already arranged for Charvaka's demise, but it would not come about through direct intervention. Instead, a future king named Duryodhana would befriend Charvaka, and bound by affection, the Rakshasa would eventually insult the Brahmanas. Stunned by this affront, the Brahmanas would unleash their wrath upon him, their words like thunderbolts striking him down. And so it came to pass that Charvaka, the mighty Rakshasa, lay slain by the curse of the Brahmanas. As Janardana finished his tale, King Yudhishthira's face was filled with a mix of sorrow and resolve. He gazed upon the bodies of his kinsmen who had perished, while observing their Kshatriya douches. His eyes seemed to hold a deep understanding, as if he knew that these heroes had transcended mortality, their souls now residing in the realm of the god. Janardana's words continued to flow like a balm to the king's wounded heart. "Do not give way to grief, O bull of Bharata's race," he said. "Your kinsmen have all perished in the observance of Kshatriya duties. Those brave warriors have gone to heaven." The sun had finally risen over Hastinapura, casting its warm rays upon the assembled gathering. Vaisempana's words echoed through the air as he began to recount the tale of King Yudhishthira's coronation. The royal son of Kunti emerged from his chambers. A sense of relief washed over him. The fever that had plagued his heart for so long seemed to have lifted, and a newfound calmness settled upon his face. He took his seat on an exquisite golden throne facing eastwards, as was customary for one about to ascend the throne. By his side sat two stalwarts of the Pandavas, Satyaki and Vasudeva, their faces aglow with the same purpose that had driven them through the trials of exile. Bhima and Arjuna, the mighty twins, occupied seats adorned with gems, their eyes fixed intently upon their brother as he prepared to take his rightful place. Meanwhile, Pritha, Yudhishthira's mother, sat regally on a white ivory throne, flanked by her two youngest sons, Sahadeva and Nakula. The wise Satharman, Vidur, Dhamya, and the venerable Kuru king Dhritarashtra occupied their own seats, each one blazing with an inner fire. The assembly came to order. Gandhari, the illustrious queen, took her seat alongside Sanjaya and Yuyutsu. The air was alive with anticipation as the priest, Dhamya, at Krishna's behest, began constructing a grand altar, its incline carefully calibrated towards the east and north, with the altar complete. A high-souled Yudhishthira, accompanied by his loyal friend Krishna, daughter of Drupada, took their seats upon the majestic Sarvata Vedra as Dhamya poured libations of clarified butter out of the sacrificial fire. The air was filled with the sweet scent of offerings to sanctify. Kunja relic from Dasaratha's lineage was then brought forth and used to pour water upon Yudhishthira's head. The royal sage, Dhritarashtra, and all the subjects present followed suit at Krishna's request, bathing their king in the sacred waters of purification. Pandavas and Aneka sounded out their drums. King Yudhishthira, radiant with newfound dignity, accepted the gifts bestowed upon him by his grateful subjects. The Brahmanas, their faces aglow with joy, presented their offerings to the just king, who in turn rewarded them with 1,000 nishkas, their voices like those of swans. The Brahmanas invoked blessings upon Yudhishthira, their words a testament to the king's good fortune. By good luck, O son of Pandu, they sang, victory has been thine. By good luck thou hast recovered. In the midst of a grand assembly, King Yudhishthira stood tall, his words dripping with sincerity, as he addressed the Brahmanas who had spoken so highly of him and his brothers. Great must be the sons of Pandu, he began, whose merits, true or false, are thus recited by such foremost of Brahmanas assembled together. The king's voice was filled with gratitude, acknowledging that their praise was a testament to the favor they enjoyed. As he spoke, Yudhishthira's eyes locked onto his subjects, his gaze piercing through the assembly. He knew that their words carried weight, and he wanted them to understand the gravity of their position. "We are all objects of favor with you," he said, "since you so freely describe us to be possessed of such attributes." His voice was laced with humility, yet it was clear that he was not seeking praise for its own sake. Yudhishthira's thoughts turned to his father, King Dhritarashtra. He spoke of the old king with reverence, calling him God, and emphasizing the importance of obeying him. The king's words were laced with a deep sense of duty as he confessed that he lived for his father alone. "Having slaughtered all my kinsmen," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow, "I live for him." In that moment it was clear that Yudhishthira's greatest obligation was to serve his father. As the assembly dispersed, King Yudhishthira turned to his brother Vimsana and entrusted him with a new role, Yuvaraja. The king appointed Vidur as his chief advisor, tasking him with assisting Vimsana in matters of state. Together they would oversee the sixfold requirements of governance, ensuring that the kingdom prospered under their care. Meanwhile, other trusted advisors were assigned to various duties. Sanjaya was appointed as general director and supervisor of finances, while Nakula took charge of the army's register, food, and paid. Falguna was tasked with resisting hostile forces and upholding justice, and Dhamya, a renowned priest, was responsible for for attending to the Brahmanas and performing sacred rites as the king continued to make appointments. It became clear that he had carefully considered each role and chosen individuals who possessed the skills and character necessary for their tasks. Sahadev, in particular, was entrusted with the special duty to remain by Yudhishthira's side at all times. The king believed that his brother should be protected from harm, and so he assigned him as his constant companion. With these appointments made king, Yudhishthira turned to Vidur and the high-souled Yuyutsu, instructing them to prioritize their father's wishes above all else. You should always, with alacrity and attention, do everything that my royal father did. The sun had barely risen over Hastinapura, casting a warm glow over the city as King Yudhishthira began his day with a sense of purpose. He was determined to honor the memories of those who had fallen in battle and to ensure their souls found peace in the next world. Vaisampayana, the wise sage, stood by the king's side as he made his way to the sacred grounds where the Sraddha rites would be performed. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the soft chanting of mantras filled the air. Yudhishthira's eyes were somber, his heart heavy with grief for those who had fallen alongside him in battle. As the rituals began, the king's thoughts turned to his kinsmen Drona and Karna, who had fought bravely on their side. He remembered the words of his mother Gandhari, who had always taught him the importance of honoring one's ancestors and loved ones. The king's eyes welled up with tears as he offered prayers for their souls, seeking to free them from the cycle of rebirth. Meanwhile, in the palace, King Dhritarashtra was preparing for a grand gesture of his own. He had decided to give away vast amounts of wealth, kind, and precious gifts to the Brahmanas, not just as an act of charity, but also as a means of securing a better life for his sons in the next world. His wife Gandhari stood by him, her eyes shining with pride as she watched him perform this noble deed. As the days passed, Yudhishthira continued to honor the memories of those who had fallen alongside him. He accompanied Draupadi on a series of visits to the families of Drishtadyumna and Abhimanyu, offering them wealth and comfort in their time of grief. The king's generosity knew no bounds, as he also remembered the Rakshasa Ghatakaka, the son of Haduma, who had fought on his side. In addition to these individual acts of devotion, Yudhishthira also established institutions that would provide for the welfare of all those who had been affected by the war. He founded houses where food and water could be distributed freely, and excavated tanks in honor of those who had fallen without leaving behind kinsmen or friends. As the king's actions became known throughout the land, his people began to see him in a new light. They realized that he was not just a victorious warrior, but also a compassionate leader who cared deeply for their well-being. The king's subjects thrived under his protection, and his reputation as a wise and just ruler spread far and wide. Years passed, and Yudhishthira continued to rule with kindness and compassion. He showed honor and respect to all those who had been dear to him, including Dhritarashtra. As the kingdom's rightful ruler came, Yudhishthira stood before his people, his hands clasped together in gratitude. The ceremony of installation had concluded, and now it was time for him to express his deepest thanks to the one who had made it all possible, Lord Krishna. With reverence in his voice, he bowed low, addressing the Divine One as Krishna, thou art the one only being, the refuge of all worshippers, the creator of the universe, and the soul that dwells within it. Yudhishthira's words were like a gentle breeze on a summer day, soothing and calming to the senses. He spoke of Krishna's many names, Vishnu, Jishu, Hari, Vikada, each one a testament to his boundless power and wisdom. The king recalled the ancient tales of Krishna's births in various wombs, including that of Aditi, where he took on 7 forms. Yudhishthira spoke of the 3 yugas, the sacred periods of time that marked humanity's journey towards enlightenment. As he continued to speak, his words became a litany of praise, a hymn to Krishna's glory. He called him the Lord of their senses, the great Lord worshipped in sacrifices, and the grinder of hostile hosts. The king acknowledged Krishna's many forms, the 3-eyed Samma, the great boar, fire, sun, and Garuda, each one a manifestation of his boundless power. Yudhishthira's voice trembled with emotion as he spoke of Krishna's prowess in battle, his irresistible might that caused foes to fade and west. He called him the Brahma, now of pure blood, those who had sprung from intermixture, and the great emperor who walked on high, a mountain among mountains. The king's words painted a picture of Krishna as these seemed vast and unending, with 3 humps and 3 abhadas. As Yudhishthira concluded his hymn, the assembly fell silent, mesmerized by the beauty of his words. Lord Krishna, seated amidst them, smelled in approval. His lotus eyes shone bright, reflecting the devotion that filled their hearts. With a gentle nod, he acknowledged Yudhishthira's praise and began to respond with words of encouragement, filling the air with sweet melodies that gladdened the eldest son of Pandu. The assembly erupted into joyous whispers as Krishna spoke, his voice like music that soothed their souls. The king listened intently, drinking in every word, his heart overflowing with gratitude for the divine one who had guided him back to his rightful throne. In this moment, surrounded by his people and the benevolent presence of Lord Krishna, Yudhishthira felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that he was not alone in his journey towards righteousness. As the sun began to set on the kingdom of Hastinapura, King Yudhishthira stood before his brothers, his eyes filled with a mix of sadness and relief. "My dear brothers," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "the battle is over and we have emerged victorious. But at what cost? Your bodies bear the scars of war and your hearts are heavy with grief and anger." Arjuna and the twins Nakula and Sahadeva stood before him, their faces etched with fatigue and sorrow. Yudhishthira's words were like a balm to their weary souls, and they listened intently as he spoke of their hardships in the forest, of being forced to live like common men. But now he said, his voice filled with joy, "Let us celebrate our victory. Let us rest and regain our strength, and then meet again in the morning as Yudhishthira." Hinish, speaking, the brothers nodded in agreement, their faces lighting up with a glimmer of hope. Ever the fierce warrior smiled grimly, his eyes still burning with the fire of battle. Arjuna's expression was more subdued, but his eyes shone with a deep sadness. The twins Nakula and Sahadeva looked at each other, their faces paled and drawn. Meanwhile, in Duryodhana's palace, Vrikadra entered like a mighty storm, his presence commanding attention. He was given the grand palace by Yudhishthira, who had assigned it to him with Dhritarashtra's approval. The palace was a marvel of architecture, adorned with gems and precious stones, its halls teeming with servants and attendants. Arjuna, too, was given a magnificent palace, one that rivaled Duryodhana's in grandeur. It was the palace of Dasasana, which was renowned for its beauty and wealth. The palace of Dharmarshana, however, was said to be even more exquisite, like the mansion of Kavara himself. Yudhishthira gave it to Nakula, who had been emaciated by his experiences in the forest. Sahadeva, ever the pleasure-seeker, was given the palace of Dharmuka, which was a marvel of beauty and luxury. It was said that the palace abounded in beds and beautiful women, their eyes like lotus petals. Sahadeva was overjoyed at receiving this gift, his heart filled with delight as he imagined the pleasures that awaited him. As the night fell, the princes feasted on viands and drinks, their hearts filled with joy and relief. They passed the night happily, and in the morning they presented themselves before King Yudhishthira, their faces radiant with happiness. The king smiled at them. The sun had barely risen over Hastinapura when King Janamejaya summoned Vaisampayana, a wise and learned Brahmana. The king's curiosity got the better of him as he asked Vaisampayana to recount the events that followed Yudhishthira's triumphant return to his kingdom. Vaisampayana began his tale by saying, "Listen, O King Janamejaya, as I narrate in detail what the Pandavas, led by Vasudeva, did after their glorious victory." The king leaned forward, eager to hear the story of his illustrious cousin. Vaisampayana continued, "As soon as Yudhishthira regained his kingdom, he appointed each of the 4 orders of men, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, to their respective duties with a sense of pride and responsibility. Yudhishthira distributed gifts to 1,000 high-souled Brahmanas of the Snataka order. Each received a nishka, a symbol of their spiritual purity. The king then turned his attention to his loyal servants, granting them each a portion of his wealth and riches. But what was remarkable about Yudhishthira's generosity was that he also fulfilled the wishes of undeserving individuals and those who held heterodox views. As Vaisampayana spoke, the scene unfolded in the mind of King Janamejaya. He saw Yudhishthira, the eldest son of Pandu, lavishing gifts upon his priests, Dhamya, kind in thousands, wealth, gold, silver, and fine robes. The king's heart swelled with pride as he heard that Yudhishthira treated Kripa, his preceptor, with the utmost respect and deference. Vidura, too, was showered with gifts of food, drink, robes, beds, and seats by the generous king. But Yudhishthira's kindness didn't stop There he restored peace to his kingdom and extended his hospitality to all who came to him, including those who held opposing views. Even Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, the former king and queen, were honored with due respect by Yudhishthira. As Vaisampayana spoke, King Janamjaya's imagination transported him to a scene where Yudhishthira, surrounded by his loyal subjects, placed his kingdom at the disposal of Dhritarashtra, Gandhari and Viduroy, his kingdom restored to its former glory. Yudhishthira set out to pay his respects to Vasudeva, who was seated on the magnificent sofa adorned with golden gems. Krishna's beauty shone like the rising sun, his blue hue radiating an otherworldly splendor. His bosom sparkled with the Kaustubha garment. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the landscape, Yudhishthira approached his brother Vasudeva, who sat in deep meditation. The air was filled with an otherworldly energy as Vasudeva's eyes seemed to gaze beyond the material realm, though of immeasurable prowess. Yudhishthira said, his voice barely above a whisper, "How wonderful is this! You are lost in contemplation, and I am filled with wonder. Your senses have been stilled, your mind concentrated within your understanding." Vasudeva's eyes slowly opened, and he gazed at Yudhishthira with a soft smile. "My dear brother," Vasudeva said, "I was thinking of Bhishma, that great warrior who lies on his bed of a rose. His mind is consumed by thoughts of me, and I must think of him." In turn, Vasudeva's words were laced with a deep affection for the venerable Bhishma. Yudhishthira listened intently as Vasudeva explained that Bhishma was a hero of great renown who had fought battles against even the gods themselves. "He is like a fire about to go out," Vasudeva said, "and his mind is consumed by thoughts of me." Vasudeva's words stirred something deep within Yudhishthira's heart. He knew that Bhishma was indeed a great soul, and he felt compelled to visit him before it was too late. "We must go to Bhishma now," Vasudeva said, his voice filled with urgency. Yudhishthira nodded in agreement, and together they approached Satyaki, who sat beside Vasudeva. "Let my chariot be up," Vasudeva commanded, and Satyaki quickly departed to make the necessary arrangements. As the chariot was prepared, Yudhishthira's heart swelled with devotion for his brother. He knew that Vasudeva was not just a mortal being, but a divine presence who had descended upon earth to guide humanity towards the path of righteousness. The sun dipped lower in the sky as they set out on their journey to visit Bhishma. The air was filled with an expectant silence, as if the very universe held its breath in anticipation of what was to come. In the presence of his grandson Janamjaya, Vaisampayana began to recount the tale of Bhishma's final moments. As the sun reached its solstitial point and began its northerly course, Bhishma, lying on a bed of arrows, focused his mind with great concentration, surrounded by esteemed Brahmins, including Vasanarada, Devastana, Jamini, Palasandalia, Devarata, Maitreya, and many others. Bhishma's body blazed with an inner radiance, much like the sun itself. The air was filled with the sweet scent of sandalwood and the soft chanting of Vedic mantras. Bhishma, his eyes closed in devotion, began to hymn the praises of Krishna, the divine Lord of Yuga, with a voice that echoed through the assembly. "O Krishna," he sang, "I seek your refuge, O universal soul and Lord of all creatures. You are pure, and purity self-transcending all. You are the Supreme Lord beyond human comprehension." As Bhishma continued to sing, his words poured forth like a river describing Krishna as the highest of the high, without beginning or end, and the creator of everything in the universe. He spoke of Krishna's divine nature beyond the reach of mortal senses and understanding. The assembly listened with rapt attention, their hearts filled with reverence for the departing Bhishma. Vaisampayana described how Bhishma's words seemed to take on a life of their own, like a mighty river flowing through the landscape of his soul. Bhishma's hymn spoke of Krishna as the one who had been born in many forms, yet remained unchanged and unchanging. He was the Sheth within which the universe lay, and all created things lived in him. Bhishma described Krishna as the slayer of Asuras, the protector of the universe, and the supreme panacea for all sorrow. As the sun reached its peak, Bhishma's final hymn rose like a crescendo, echoing through the assembly with an otherworldly beauty. "Salutations to you, O Krishna," he sang, "you who are the soul of the sun, the slayer of Asuras, and the one beyond mortal comprehension. Salutations to you in your form as some gratifying the gods." And Pitras, like the assembly, listened in awe, their hearts filled with a sense of reverence for the divine Krishna, who had been hailed by Bhishma's final hymns. And so, with his words echoing through eternity, Bhishma's spirit soared into the realm of the divine, leaving behind a legacy of devotion and praise that would be remembered for generations to come. As the sun rose over the vast expanse of Kurukshetra, a summer procession made its way towards the battlefield. At its forefront rode Hrishakesha, the mighty Krishna, flanked by King Yudhishthira and his 4 brothers. The Pandavas behind them followed Kripa and other notable warriors, their chariots adorned with colorful standards and banners galloping swiftly across the plain. The landscape before them was a grim reminder of the devastating war that had ravished this land. The ground was covered in a thick layer of hair, marrow, and bones, the remnants of countless high-souled Kshatriyas who had laid down their lives on this very field. Towering hills made from the bodies and bones of elephants and steeds stretched towards the sky, while human heads and skulls lay scattered about like discarded conch shells. As they approached, the air grew thick with an eerie silence, punctuated only by the distant wails of spirits and the cacophony of rickshaws. As the ground itself seemed to writhe in agony, as if the very earth was still reeling from the impact of the war. Thousands of funeral pyres stood like sentinels, their flames dancing in the morning breeze, while heaps of armor and weapons lay scattered about, a testament to the unrelenting ferocity of battle. Krishna, ever the master strategist, broke the silence as they rode towards the 5 lakes of Rama, which shone like beacons on the horizon. "Behold, Yudhishthira," he said, his voice carrying across the plain. "There lies the site where Rama, the great Jamadagni's son, had offered oblations to his ancestors using the blood of Kshatriyas as sacrificial offerings." Krishna's words hung in the air like a challenge, and Yudhishthira's curiosity was piqued. "Tell me, O Krishna," Yudhishthira asked, his voice laced with skepticism, "how did Rama manage to exterminate the Kshatriya order 3 times 7 when their very seed seemed to have been wiped out? How did it revive itself?" The question hung like a challenge in the air, and Krishna's response was met with rapt attention from all who rode behind him. Krishna's eyes sparkled as he began to recount the tale of Rama's triumph. "It is said that when Rama had freed the earth from the scourge of Kshatriyas 3 times 7, he returned to his task, determined to cleanse the land." Once more Krishna's words painted a vivid picture in Yudhishthira's mind, as if the very scenes were unfolding before him. Yudhishthira pressed on, seeking clarification. But how did Rama exterminate the Kshatriya order? What reason lay? In the distant past, King Vasudeva shared a tale with Prince Arjuna about the lineage of Rama, a mighty warrior from the Praya dynasty. The story began with Jadu, a king who had a son named Righteous, and then Valikasva, who was followed by Kasika, a righteous ruler who resembled Indra. The 1,000-eyed god Kasika's devotion to his penances was so great that even Indra himself appeared before him and blessed him with a son. This son was Gadai, who would go on to become a powerful king in his own right. Gadai had a daughter named Satyavati, whom he gave in marriage to Richaika, a wise sage from the Praya dynasty. Richaika, eager to have a child of great wisdom and tranquility, prepared sacred food with Vedic mantras. After igniting the fire, however, due to an unexpected twist of fate, Satyavati ended up consuming the portion meant for her mother, which contained the energy of Kshatriyas. This led to Satyavati giving birth to a son who would become Rama. The exterminator of Kshatriyas, Richaika, aware of what had happened, explained to Satyavati that she would actually bear a Brahmana child, while her mother would have a Kshatriya son. Richaika's words were met with skepticism by Satyavati, who pleaded with him to give her a son who was righteous and devoted to peace. Richaika eventually relented and agreed to grant Satyavati a son of tranquil pursuits. This child was Jamadagni, a sage who would go on to become an Asena of penances. Jamadagni's own son, Rama, would grow up to be a mighty warrior with the power to vanquish even the gods. From a story became intertwined with that of Arjuna, the 1,000-armed king of the Himayas. Arjuna had once given alms to the god of fire, Agni, who had then gone on to burn villages and towns in his quest for more offerings. Apab, a sage, was so enraged by this destruction that he cursed Arjuna, saying that Rama would cut off one of his arms despite this curse. Arjuna remained unaware of it until the day when Jamadagni's Homa calf was stolen from him. The dispute between Jamadagni and Arjuna eventually led to a confrontation between Rama and Arjuna himself. In the heat of battle, Rama lopped off one of Arjuna's arms, thus fulfilling the curse of Apava's story of Rama, and his lineage came full circle as Vasudeva shared it with Prince Arjuna, who was about to face a great challenge in his own life, The tale served as a reminder that even the sun was setting over the sacred land, casting a warm orange glow over the land. Skate King Yudhishthira, son of Dharma, sat in awe as he listened to Vasampayana recount the tale of Rama's mighty feats. The king's eyes widened with wonder as he compared Rama's prowess to that of Sakra himself as Vasampayana finished his story. Yudhishthira turned to Janardana Krishna and said, "O thou of Vrishni's race, the high-souled Rama's deeds are a testimony